Hi, everybody. We're now recording. Welcome to today's Cathedra webinar. We are coming to you live on May 22nd. For those of you who don't know, our Cathedra webinars get their name from the Creek word for learning. And today you're going to be learning all about annuities from your instructor, Shantae Moore, who's a certified financial educator with Native American Financial Literacy Services. My name is Brooke Warrington. I'm the Training and Development Specialist here at the Native Learning Center. We're also happy that you could be with us for today's webinar. If you could follow along with the disclaimer while I read it aloud. This webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. We also have our copyright infringement law printed here. This is just a friendly reminder that the webinar materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. Moving forward, anything that you need to find as far as resources or recordings or any of the other webinars that we've hosted on this new learning platform, you can find it in the courses section. I actually meant to put the link to today's slides in the chat for y'all already. I apologize for that. I did not do that just yet, but the link is in the chat for you now. And then anytime you're joining a webinar in the future, you'll just log in during the time that the webinar is happening. And you'll click on that green banner to come into the webinar room just like you did today. We do ask that you join with listen-only capabilities. It just helps us to cut down on audio feedback. And then if you've joined and you realize the sound is coming out of the wrong device, maybe you're trying to use your headphones, maybe you have a Bluetooth speaker, anything like that, you can click on that little telephone icon that's at the bottom of your screen, and that'll bring up a list of your microphone and your speaker devices, and you can select the proper output. We do, of course, encourage class participation. So there's several different ways you can interact during today's webinar. We're primarily going to rely on the public chat feature. If you don't yet have that open, you can pull it up by clicking on public chat. That's just under messages. When you pull it open, you should see a message from me that says today's presentation slides with the link. If you have any questions, you have any comments, if you're having any tech support issues you want me to help you navigate through, you'll just come down here where it says send message to public chat. Click in that box, type in what you'd like to say, and then you can hit the enter button, or you can click on this little paper airplane icon, and that'll send it in where everyone can see it. We also have the shared notes section, and in the shared notes section, you can find a list of helpful links. We have a link to the slides for today. We have a link to our Cathedra webinar archive that's on YouTube, a link to today's webinar feedback survey. A lot of different things are in there. And then if you have joined and you are unmuted, you can always mute yourself by coming down to this microphone. And if you set a question into the chat or any tech support issue or anything like that, and you fear that we have missed it, you could always use the little hand raise feature to draw our attention to it. All right, if you haven't already, if you don't mind going ahead and opening up that public chat feature, it's nice for us to see everyone who's involved in the webinar for the day. You could take a moment, let us know your name, where you're tuning in from. It's fun to see all the different tribal nations that are present, your work or your role in an Indian country. Maybe it led you to today's webinar. Maybe you're just here for personal information, and then your tribal affiliation, if you have one. You might be a tribal employee who doesn't have one. That's okay too. All right, folks, just a quick final warning before I hand it over to the instructor. If you click on this red menu panel that's all the way to the left-hand side of your screen, yours might not say the words, yours might just be the little icons. But just to give you a heads up, if you click on any of that, it is going to pull you out of the webinar, and it's going to take you to whatever you've selected on the menu. You will be able to rejoin by just simply clicking on that green banner at the top of the screen once again. I just want to give you a heads up that it'll pull you out. There won't be like a warning or are you sure? It'll just take you directly to what you've selected. So just be mindful of that as we go through the webinar. And then while y'all are introducing yourselves in the chat, it's with great pleasure that I introduce your webinar instructor for today, Shantae Moore. And Shantae, I have made you presenter now. Oh, Shantae, I believe you're still muted.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much. I apologize about that. Appreciate the introduction and good afternoon to everyone. I definitely look forward to seeing where everyone is joining in from. I'm personally based in the Midwest, outside of Chicago area. We have someone here from Alaska. Super cool. So morning time for you, right? But, just happy to be here and have this conversation. So let's go ahead and get started to talk about annuities. And I wanted to address myths and facts. And the reason why I did, because of like when I was putting together the presentation, I really wanted to, address specifically the word myths and facts, because to be honest, like if you go online and try to Google, annuities, are they bad for you? Are they good? What are, how do they work? You'll find, like, you could very likely find information that's on like total opposite ends of the spectrum. Some people say they're horrible, they're really bad. Some people are like, oh my God, these are the greatest things in the world. And, I want to just give you the education. I really don't like when folks give blanket perspectives and say, this is it. This is all bad, or this is all good. Like, let's just get into the nitty gritty and just understand. So that's why I wanted to make sure I specifically mention, like, let's hear what the myths are that are out there, and let's talk about the actual facts as well. All right, so I do have my own disclosure also. So everything that I'm sharing today is for educational purposes only. I'm not here to try and solicit or, make you buy or sell anything, nothing like that. I also just want to make sure that, if I talk about any examples, which I do go through a couple like hypothetical graphs and things of that nature, they are just hypothetical. I'm not saying that this is a hardcore number or anything like that. And sometimes, and especially for those watching the recording, laws change. Annuities fall under the spectrum of life insurance laws. So things can change. They do change. So just keep that in mind. And you won't learn everything on this webinar about annuities. Again, I'll give you a high level of education, but if this is something you're interested in further, I highly encourage you to find a professional, and I'll talk about that in a quick second in the presentation, to really have a conversation with someone individualized to your situation. Annuities are not for everybody. They don't work for everybody. And it really only makes sense, in individual situations, which I'll address. We have someone here from the Navajo Nation. I'm Navajo as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Like, why do we have a conversation about annuities? Because annuities really solve a problem. When folks are thinking about retiring, and I'll go through some slides to talk about it, I think most folks would agree that retirement is different now. It's not like past generations where someone would work for 30 years, 40 years at an employer. And then, they had we had shorter lifespans back then, decades ago. And then, someone would stop working and retire. And then, they would unfortunately pass away in 5 or 10 years. That's different. Folks are living long. As we can see here, this is according to usafacts.org. Average life expectancy, and that's for those born between 1900 and 2023. Women, we do tend to outlive men. I don't know how or why, but we do. Maybe some men would say we stress them out or something. I don't know. It's just being a little cheeky here, but women on average live to age 81, a little over 81, and then men to age 75. And so why am I bringing this up? Like life expectancy, because at some point when you do stop working and you do retire, we now have to fund a long life, a long life to live until the end of time. And that's the problem. It's a real struggle right now. Folks are living longer, thankfully to advances in medicine and treatments and things. We're not, if people get sick, they get sick, they stay sick for a very long time, before they even pass away. Whereas before, someone would get sick and they would pass away right away. So it's different. And we have to consider longevity. And when you have wealth, when you have any type of money, longevity risk is a real risk that we need to prepare for. And today's, conversation about annuities will help address that longevity risk. So let's look at a couple, just a little educational information. So when we think about retirement, just in general, just retirement in general. Statistics say that you will need at least 70% of your pre-retirement income to live on. And I've done webinars all about retirement, so I'm not going to speak all about retirement today, but annuities, again, fall into the category, fall into the conversation. First of all, we need to realize that we need to understand what will our sources of income be in retirement. Think of like your retirement like a plane, like here on the image. You need 2 wings to fly a plane, right? So most savings that people have in retirement, if they have any, it would be in a 401k, which is a retirement account, that's offered by a workplace. If the employer is nice enough to even offer that type of plan. On average, the average American baby boomer, baby boomers are those turning 65. Right now we have 10,000 people turning 65 every single day. So that baby boomer generation right now have an average of $215,000 in their accounts. Social Security, which I would say most people actually really depend on Social Security for their retirement income. If they do stop working, if and when they do decide to stop working. Social Security, when it was first enacted, was only designed to cover about 40% of your income. So let's say you were making, hypothetically, $100,000 a year. Social Security was only designed to pay you. You work hard, you contribute to Social Security, you earn that benefit. That's a benefit our government pays you. It was only designed to cover 40%. So if you made $100,000, hypothetically, you would receive $40,000 in Social Security. So let's kind of think of that. You were living off of $100,000, to pay your bills, live your life when you were working. And now if Social Security is the only option you have, now you're living off of so much less. And then, hopefully you might have had some savings from the job that you would be able to leverage as well. And thank you, Brooke, for putting that link into the description. I did great webinar on planning for retirement. So I'm going through this because the other side of the plane, the other wing, is personal savings. Some folks just feel like, oh, Social Security, I'm just going to rely on Social Security and maybe whatever my job offers, and they don't even save anything extra on the side. And I think we're seeing, in our economy and our lives that we can't depend on the government, nor can we depend on an employer to take care of us. We really do have to make sure we're on track with even just doing additional savings outside of those sources. So when we think about savings and money in retirement, often most people do have some type of shortfall when they do leave. And I want to be clear, retirement is not an age. It's not just, oh, now I'm 67, I can stop working. If you had enough money saved, you could stop working today, no matter your age. So let's just be very clear on that. It's about how much money do you have saved, and is that enough, or will it run out? So here on the image, we show someone who has, they're just depending on their Social Security and maybe whatever they might be saving at the job. And then they say, oh, well, now I'm 67, let me quit working. And then quickly, having little to no personal savings, that money runs out pretty quickly. It's not enough. And unfortunately, this is what I see, we end up having what's called insufficient income, where we're not living the life that we wanted in retirement. Like you stop working, but your income is totally different. So folks have to go back into the workforce, restrict their lifestyle. That's really what most people do. They just restrict their lifestyle. They're not living the retirement life they really wanted or wanted to enjoy. Some go and live with their children, which is not uncommon in our tribal communities. I mean, we're very multi-generational families. We see that all the time, right? Grandparents and the adult parents living with their parent, with their children in one household. But at the end of the day, if we really want to be intentional about planning for retirement and saving money for retirement, the goal is we really want to have reliable income. And that's what I'm going to really talk about today in talking about annuities, because it gives reliable income. it really is determining, if I save enough money, how can I turn those savings into reliable income so that no matter what happens, no matter how long I live, I will have enough money coming in. That's really what the ultimate goal is. Savings that will last as long as I live, and to potentially leave some more behind, to actually leave a legacy. I think a lot of folks, we hear that term generational wealth. Well, generational wealth is meaning that you have accumulated funds and resources to pass on to the next generation. And you can do that through your savings, especially if you don't spend everything, while having a decent retirement yourself. So, at the end of the day, the biggest question to answer is, will your wealth last as long as you do? That's it. That's the biggest question, is whenever I decide to stop working, will my money, my savings, my wealth last as long as me? And we already see that we're planning, just with our current life, we're expected to live a really long life. 63% of people have a greater fear of running out of money in retirement than actually dying, than passing away. That was according to a 2017 study by Allianz, which is a big investment company. So, if we're really thinking about living long lives, will I have enough money coming in? That's the question. That's a question we need to answer. And so the reality is, what financial strategies are available to me? What solutions are available to me to where I avoid the risk of running out of money? That's it. Just, are there strategies that are available where I actually can run out of money, where I don't run out of money, rather? So for, when we think about the conversation, when your retirement income isn't guaranteed, you've left yourself open to getting punched in the mouth. That's why, I'm sorry, I'm just reading a quote here. It says, that's why you don't get in the ring, just like Clark said. You want to look at sources of having guaranteed income. Social Security could be guaranteed. In a recent Gallup survey, 85% of American investors said they wanted additional streams of income to supplement Social Security. Social Security is supposed to be guaranteed. We'll see. We'll see if it's funded enough. But is it a good likelihood, especially if you're older in age and you're a baby boomer already, Social Security will be there for you? Absolutely. It's a pretty good chance that the funds will be there. But most people one thing about Social Security, if you know anyone who lives off of it right now, they can expect that money to come in month after month. That's a level of comfortability, right? So today we're going to talk about what other financial solutions are out there to where I can, kind of mimic that, where I can, no matter what, I'll get some money coming in. Now, when we think about how do we avoid running out of money in retirement? Most people, what they're doing is, if they're trying to save money, they're investing in the stock market somewhere. Here on the screen is represented as an equity investment. You're investing money, in your 401k, maybe might even have your own investment accounts outside of the job that people are putting money away in. And the nice thing about, just in general, just investing in the stock market is that you have that upside potential. The whole point, right, is if I put my money away, that it'll grow and increase in value, right? Like, that's the whole point. You get that upside potential if the market is performing well, if the economy is doing well. That's how you grow your money, your investments, is because the stock market is increasing in value. Now, with that, at the same time, there's also a downside risk. If you're invested in the market and, there's a crazy announcement made. And I mean, the most recent announcement I can think of was when our president announced tariffs. And this isn't a political statement. It's just, what happened when tariffs were announced. What happened to the stock market? Like, in that one day, it took a tumble about 10%. And then coincidentally, a couple of days later, the next week, he was like, oh yeah, I'm going to change the tariff amounts. And then the stock market recovered right away. So that potential, and that was just off of one announcement, which can be concerning, it can cause a lot of fear, and that's why the market responds. So that's the downside potential, is that yeah, I can grow my money in the stock market, but I could also lose my money as well. And that's especially as you get closer to retirement, that's the game you don't want to be in that game. You don't want to be in potential, some people I see that are a little older and are closer to retirement. They're I want to be in the most aggressive investment. I'm trying to grow my money as much as possible, but not also forgetting that they're putting their money at risk as well. And, as we get closer to retirement, you really want to start avoiding risk. And that's what, this strategy talks about. I mean, a reliable income strategy, we call it the RISE strategy. How could a retirement strategy with a living benefit rider help ensure that you don't run out of money? So consider this strategy. What if we have a strategy where I can still grow my money? I can still get that upside potential, but guess what? I don't have to worry about losing it. As a matter of fact, all the potential of losing that money is completely eliminated. Completely eliminated. So the only thing I can do is just grow. My money can just only grow. I don't have to worry about any losses because something happened crazy in the stock market. And that's where, we have to get strategic about our savings and our wealth. With this strategy as well, you see there's a little white box here where it says 5% growth for reliable income. And so what that means is that in addition to growing my money, not losing it, hypothetically, I could also, grow my money guaranteed, 5% growth no matter what. So, and that's a potential strategy. And it's something that folks might be interested in, right? Like, wow, where can I do that? So when we think about avoiding, the risk of running out of money in retirement, there's 3 things we got to consider, and I'm talking about reliable. We're not just talking about I'm putting my money in an investment account and I'm crossing my fingers and hoping it works out. No, we're being very strategic. We're looking at and calculating what type of reliable income can I, depend on in the future. So the first component is we just still have to grow. How can I still grow my money? Participate in the upside growth potential that's tied to the stock market. And it has to be tied to the stock market. Having your money sitting in a bank account and a savings account on the sideline somewhere, it's not going to grow. I mean, you might get a little bit of interest, but we're talking about growth. How can I really grow my money? Now, the second component is reducing or completely removing the potential to lose money altogether. When you're getting closer to retirement, you can't afford any losses, because you got to remember, you're going to stop working at some point. You don't want, like, right before you decide to retire, your investment account or whatever, it suddenly drops in value. Now what? That happened to a lot of folks back in 2008, 2009. That was a couple years after I got into this industry, and a few years after I got into the industry, and I saw folks that couldn't stop working. They lost about 30%, almost 40% of the value of their retirement account at the job, and they had to keep working because their investments were so risky. They lost a significant amount. And then, so the third component is, we grow money, we remove losses, but also, how do I create a predictable income that lasts? So that no matter what, when I decide to, start receiving monthly income, monthly or annual income, it will always be there, literally until the end of my life. And this strategy, my friends, is an annuity. It's an annuity. All right, we're done with the webinar. We can all log off. No, we're not going to log off. But that's how an annuity works. And again, the way, depending on what you Google, you'll learn so many bad things or good things. And so I just kind of like to break it down that way. This annuity strategy is that this is how it works. You can grow your money, remove losses, and then you can turn on income for the rest of your life. So let's go into some, textbook details. So what is an annuity? An annuity is a financial products that offer a guaranteed income stream, usually purchased by individuals who are like pre-retirement or, already about to retire. And I'll kind of explain that part a little bit as well. So when you have this annuity, you have a contract basically with an insurance company. And because insurance companies are the ones who issue annuities, insurance and investment companies. So when you give your money to the insurance company, it now goes into what's called accumulation phase, where you're the annuitant. This is your money. You're the investor, quote unquote. You either put in a lump sum amount of money, or you just do a little, month to month. I'm going to add money, and we're in what's called an accumulation phase. And so the accumulation phase is just that. The money is growing. It's accumulating. So when we talk about that upside potential earlier, your money is just growing. It's increasing in value depending upon what the stock market is doing. And then after you're, accumulated as much as you want, now let's say now you're ready to retire. You're tired of growing the money. You want to start pulling money out. Now we go into what's called an annuitization period. And this is where you're telling the annuity company and saying, you know what, now I want to pull money out for the rest of my life. I want to start pulling money out. I want to start taking payments out. And those payments, and I don't go through the calculations because it's so involved. There's so many different types of annuities, and I'll go through those in a second. But I want to explain the hypothetical, high level, how this works. So now you say, okay, I want to actually take money out, payments for the rest of my life. Or you could choose a fixed period. You could say, pay me out, this money in 10 years, 20 years. But most people don't choose those options. They just say, pay me money for the rest of my life. What does that look like? Now, a couple things to just understand with annuities is that your funds are what we call illiquid. Illiquid, meaning when you put money into an annuity, you can't take it out again. Like, it's not like a bank account where you could just make a deposit and make a withdrawal. And let me say you can't take it out. You can. But if you do, you're going to be subject to surrender periods. There's withdrawal penalties. These are financial solutions where you don't want to touch them. You really, some of them are available immediately, but most people, if you're trying to grow your money, usually when you have an annuity, there's a surrender period tied to it. And a surrender period just basically says, like, the insurance company is telling you, we don't want you touching this money because we need time to grow it. It's not, money isn't going to grow overnight. We need time to grow it. So we're going to have maybe, let's say, hypothetically, a 6-year surrender period, meaning we don't want you touching this money for the first 6 years. Give us that time to grow it. But if you, for whatever reason, you do need to pull money out, you're going to be charged a fee and probably a penalty to do so because they don't want you touching that money. Some surrender periods are 3 years, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Most of them go up to 10 years. And so you first of all, understand that there are surrender periods and there are surrender fees. So the illiquid feature of this is super important to understand, because if you're putting money into this annuity, you really have to have the mindset of, I'm not touching this money for a while, for whatever that surrender period is. Now, technically, again, can you access those funds? Yes, you can. It's not like it's hostage. It's still your money. You can access it, but you're going to pay fees. You'll be paying taxes. It won't be worth it. If you feel like you're going to need to access some of that money sooner, you won't be able to wait the surrender period, then an annuity is not the solution for you. It's not. Go have a bank account, so many other options. So illiquid, you cannot access this money. You're not supposed to, or else you're going to get slapped on the hand and hit with a bunch of fees and penalties. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just know that. Just know it. And so where would you get an annuity from? So you actually will have a financial professional that you'll work with. It's an insurance product. So that financial professional has to hold a life insurance license for your resident state. So for example, if someone is, in Alaska, as mentioned here on the webinar, the person who's helping you would need to have an Alaska, life insurance license for that state. So this could be with financial advisors. It could be with insurance agents, life insurance agents. So that's who you would work with to establish an annuity. You can Google annuities online and maybe you'll find, there's so many insurance companies out there that offer them. And you could be like, doing research and like, oh, I like this annuity. Let's say you found an annuity, you liked it really well. You're going to get to a point on that website where they're going to say, great, you like this annuity? Now go contact your financial professional. I have not seen one where you can actually get one on your own. You have to have a financial professional, and it's for compliance purposes. It's to protect you. All right. So now that we have just like a high level of like what is an annuity, how does it work, I want to talk about and address an income rider, because this is the portion that guarantees you income for life. Again, remember, we live in a long life. We want to have money coming in for life. So an annuity contract can have an income rider. This is not required. You don't have to have one. You could just have an annuity that just grows and grows in value, and there is no income rider. Majority of folks, especially those who are close to retirement, they do add an income rider. And what does that mean? How does that work? So now that, let's say we put this money into an annuity, it grew in value. Now we can go back to the insurance company and say, you know what? I want to turn on income. That's just the verbiage I use. I now want to start taking money out for this. I want to turn on income. And what that means is that the insurance company will say, okay, great. Based on the value of this annuity, how much we've grown it to, based on your age, this is how much we can, pay you. This is the percent that we can pay you every month out of this annuity. And so every annuity company, they have like these rate tables where, they'll say, well, if you're age 65, and you pull money out, we'll pay you 7% of, the income base from your annuity for the rest of your life. Every company, that's kind of like the competitiveness of insurance companies is they try to just have better income riders. They try to have better features, higher percentages. So that's why you work with a financial professional, because we shop around for you. We know which companies offer what. If you're married, that might make a difference. If you have two people who want to receive income, that'll make a difference. There's so many options. And again, it's too much for me to go in through the webinar. I just want to explain it high level for you. A couple of things too. So when you're looking at an annuity and you're looking at, okay, I definitely want this income rider, because the income rider, the purpose of having it is that it's guaranteeing that money for the rest of your life. When you turn on the income, the rider is saying, no matter what, we're going to pay you this money. And I don't think I put an illustration in here. I want you to understand that because the rider is guaranteeing income for life, there's a great possibility that you're going to get paid way more money than what you actually put in. Let's say you put in $100,000. Because you live so long, you might get paid $200,000. Way more money than what you put in. That's why people get this rider. This is why people care about, looking at these type of features in annuities, because compare, let's just compare. Let's say you had a 401k at your job, and most people say, well, I have my 401k. I'll just pull money out of that. Guess what? Two things. First of all, your 401k is invested in the stock market. That value is constantly going up, and it's going down. It's going up. It's going down. And you're going to get to a point where you will deplete that money. You will pull out all the money available, because you pull out 10,000, guess what? It decreases in value. You pull out another 10,000, whatever, it decreases in value. You're going to get to a point where you're going to pull out all the money and it's going to get to zero and there's nothing left. With an annuity, with an income rider, that doesn't happen. Let's say you pull out $10,000. You pull out 10,000, you're going to get that $10,000 for the rest of your life. And some people say, oh my God, this is too good to be true. How do insurance companies do that? Because they know what they're doing. This is not a get you gotcha scam. This isn't. This is how they work. These are how annuity contracts work. And insurance companies, they are, you would think like the biggest companies in the world are like your Googles, your Tesla, your Amazons. No, it's actually insurance companies. They have so many assets. You have to think about insurance companies who issue these annuities. They also issue life insurance policy, contracts. If someone passes away, they have to pay out that money. So the way insurance companies are structured is they have so much money. They have to have like 10 times the reserves of, their policies, because if something happens, they have to pay out every single policy. And so they actually have more assets than any other big company in the world. But anyway, I don't want to go off on that tangent. So you don't have to worry about like, oh my God, what if the insurance company goes under? Very unlikely. If they do, they'll get bought out. And then there's still state insurance laws that will protect you as well. So a couple things too. If you're sitting down with someone and you're looking for an income rider, you want to ask, is there a fee? Because sometimes you got to think about it. If they're going to pay you this money for life, there's probably a fee attached to it. And the fee could be 1% or 1.25%, maybe less. Just ask, is there a fee for this? Some annuity contracts don't have a fee. Ask, never hesitate to ask about fees, because that's a big myth. People, if you go on Google, they're like, oh, well, annuities, they're bad because they have all these fees. First of all, any investment has a fee attached to it. We just don't know it. It's just, you want to ask and, have disclosure on that. Like I mentioned earlier, this rider, that Income for Life, hedges longevity risk to where no matter how long you live, you're going to get that money. This is equivalent to like having a pension at a job. If you have a pension, if you're lucky, if you're one of the lucky ones to have a pension at a job, pensions, the way they work is that, you've accumulated this benefit, you've worked, your entire lifetime with a company or whatever. So when you start working, when you stop working, your employer pays you money. That's your retirement income for the rest of your life. It doesn't, usually doesn't stop at any point until you pass away. You receive that pension. Just like that's exactly how an annuity income works as well. Pretty much exactly similar. You also may have what we call survivor payments. So this could be, like I mentioned earlier, if you're married and maybe you say, well, while I'm alive, I'll get half of the money, and then I'm taking only half of what's available because I want my spouse to get the remaining money, until they actually pass away. So with these, with these contracts, we are looking at a point of, if you live a really long life, you're probably likely going to take out way more money than what you actually put in. And that's why, that's why people like them, because they don't have to worry about running out of money. I hope this is making sense. Feel free to put some questions in the chat. I want to transition a little bit. Oh, I hope you guys can hear me. I got a notice to see if my connection was lost. All right, I want to transition a little bit to talk about taxes. And taxes do matter, and I'll tell you why. You can't talk about retirement and income, money in retirement without talking about taxes. They go hand in hand. And so depending on, what financial account you have, I went into great detail about that on my other webinar about planning for retirement. The government, unfortunately, determines how much of that money we actually get to keep, that you actually get to live off on in retirement, how much goes to, how much do you pay taxes to the government, and then how much can be left over to go to your family, to your children, to leave a legacy. So you really want to make sure you understand the financial solution that you have and how is it taxed. So just real quickly, I just want to touch on this briefly. So when we're thinking about taxes, just kind of over here on the right-hand side of the screen, there's 3 ways you can be taxed. It's tax now, tax later, or tax never. So tax now is just that. Every year, you pay taxes on any interest and earnings and dividends that you earn. You'll get a 1099 form from the financial institution where you earn those interests, that interest and dividends, and you file that with your tax returns every year. Then you have tax later. These are what we call tax deferred accounts, meaning taxes are paid when you actually start pulling money out in retirement. So with those type of accounts, and I'll show you some examples on the next couple slides. On those type of accounts, these are pretty much all retirement accounts operate in the tax later bucket. While you're growing and investing your money, you're not paying taxes. You get hit with taxes later in retirement when you actually need it the most. And then you have your tax never accounts where the money you put in has already been taxed. So while it's growing and investing, you don't pay taxes. And when you pull money out and on your earnings, you don't pay taxes as well. So think about the seed versus the harvest. We're Native people, right? Our ancestors would plant seeds and harvest the seeds and whatever grew. So let's just say you had $10,000 at age 29, and you were earning 9% interest every year. So by the time you reach 65, and you were from 29 to 65, as long as you maintain that $10,000, it would grow to $250,000. So let's think about this. So would you rather pay taxes on the seed, which is just the $10,000, which is just the beginning monies, right? You don't pay a lot, and then or would you let that seed grow into this big harvest and you pay the taxes on the big amount? So unfortunately, most people will say, I want to pay taxes on the seed. Why would I pay taxes on the bigger amount when I could just pay taxes on the small amount? So unfortunately, annuities fall into the harvest category because they fall into the tax later category. So these are just a couple examples of different savings and investment accounts. So here are the yellow. The yellow means they're taxed later. You pay your taxes in retirement. So anything at the job, most accounts at the job, unless it's a Roth account, your 401ks, 403bs, traditional IRAs, all that money is growing tax-free, which is a great benefit. It increases in value. It's growing and growing, but it's not until later in retirement when you start pulling money out when you have to pay your taxes. Annuities are the same way. They fall into to the same type of category. So monies that you put into the annuity, they grow tax deferred until retirement. And at that point, when you start pulling money out, you pay taxes on the money that you receive from annuities. So I wanted to be very clear on that. Now, again, is that a bad thing? No, not necessarily. Just understand it. I mean, and one thing I always tell folks to think about is, how far is retirement for you? I'm 40 right now, so I'll be actually 41 in a couple of days. So retirement for me is at least 25 years, right? The challenge though is that I know what tax rates are now. I have no clue what tax rates will be 25 years from now. I don't know. I don't know what, I can only imagine what they'll be. I mean, our government is still, we got a lot of debt to work out. We got a lot of, social benefit programs to fund. In the past, historical data tells us that our government likes to raise taxes to pay for these things. So I don't know what tax rates will be in the future for me, but and it's almost like writing a blank check to the IRS. So annuities do fall into that category. Again, not saying that's a bad thing, because I like the fact that your growth is tax deferred, which is nice, because when the markets are doing well and your account really does increase in value, you don't have to pay taxes. It's tax deferred. It's not taxed until later in life when you pull it out. And then just real quickly, because I did bring up taxes, these are options for tax-free accounts, tax-free options. So government bonds, Roth IRAs, permanent life insurance will fall into that category. So let's actually talk a little bit more about annuities and like the different types. So a few advantages. The first advantage, again, is that tax deferral opportunity. That's a big deal. If you want to take advantage of accounts that grow tax deferred, because it's just growing. You're not paying taxes, so nothing's coming out. It's just growing, increasing in value. You want to take advantage of that. Advantages of annuities is, again, they give you those guaranteed streams of income for life. You also have contract provisions. And what do we mean by that? Why is that an advantage? Because depending on the type of annuity you have, the benefits you add onto it, those are contract provisions, which means no matter what, they have to be upheld. Like I said, when we have a contract with an insurance company, you're giving them your money because they're putting in a contract. You give us this money, this is how we're going to pay you. This is how we're going to grow it. Those are contract provisions. As opposed to, let's just say you are just directly invested in the stock market. There's no guarantee that it'll grow. There's no guarantee that you won't lose money. Those provisions are not in those no, there is no contract. So you have some protections, with these with the contracts provisions. And generally annuities are probate free. And what do we mean by probate free? I did a webinar Tuesday all about wills and trusts. And the probate process is if I have any property or assets of value and I don't have like a will or trust in place, those things are up for grabs. The courts determine who gets them. With annuity contracts, because they are issued by insurance companies, when you open an annuity, you do name a beneficiary. You do, or beneficiaries. So when you have a beneficiary on any type of account, there's no probate at all. It just goes straight to that beneficiary. So let's say you purchase an annuity, and for whatever reason you didn't take out all the money. There's some money left over, and you actually passed away. That value of leftover, whatever's left over in that annuity, will go to the beneficiary that's listed on your account, on your annuity. And thank you, Brooke, for posting the webinar from Tuesday. It was actually a really good webinar. I encourage anyone, go watch that one. So annuities fall into that category of it has a beneficiary. So whatever's left over, if anything is left over. And I mentioned if because remember, you could get to a point where you're pulling out way more money than what you put in. So there will be some point where there's nothing left over technically, but they have to still keep paying you. So at that point, there's nothing that will go to your beneficiaries. And this can actually be projected. When you're getting an annuity, we're able to show you like how much income you can get, how much will it last, what could it potentially grow to. So all this is, you'll get all that information in advance when you work with a professional. So things common to all annuities, again, is that tax deferral. They're issued by life insurance companies, provides that income that you cannot outlive. And again, they're treated similar to IRAs and those retirement accounts at your workplace for tax purposes. So that money grows tax deferred. So technically, not technically, factually, because it's considered a retirement account, you actually cannot pull out any money before age 59 and a half. So again, this is why annuities are ideally used for folks closer to retirement. If you access that money, because you can, remember I mentioned earlier, you can pull that money out. These are the penalties I was talking about. You'll not only will you pay taxes, you're going to pay a 10% early withdrawal penalty. And there'll probably be a surrender penalty or fee as well, depending on if it's still in a surrender phase, a surrender period. So this is why most folks, like if you're in your 20s or 30s, probably not talking to you about an annuity, because remember, it's illiquid. It's money that's not accessible until retirement. So very, very few instances have I done annuities for people who are not, who are younger, like in their 30s or 40s. 40s, yes, makes sense. But 30s, probably not. You can grow your money a different way. In the few instances that I did recommend an annuity was because, the person was so scared of the stock market. Like, I don't want to, they didn't want to touch it. They didn't want to deal with the stock market at all. Because they're like, I don't want to lose anything because otherwise I'm just going to keep my money in the bank. And I'm like, all right, well, that's not going to be helpful. We can do, a certain type of annuity that will at least give you a lot more growth rather than the bank. So some differences among annuities, because there are different types, which I'll show you in a little bit. Now, some differences are the level of risk involved. Now, so far, I've been talking about annuities in a way of where you don't lose anything. But there are some annuities where you can actually lose money. Now, does that make sense for certain people? It could, and I'll kind of explain when or why that would make sense. Because some people are like, well, why would I want to lose money? Well, there's other reasons. There's some benefits that will offset that. So just understand some annuities do have a potential to lose money. Just know that, The difference is whether the client or the insurance company bears the risk. So again, that's if you lose money, that's meaning you bear that risk. Other annuities, you don't lose money. That's where the insurance company takes on that risk. And then the other differences are whether the client will receive payments immediately or some point in the future. So I kind of talked about that a little bit earlier, where some annuities, you give the insurance company a large lump sum, and then you can immediately start taking money out. That's called an immediate annuity. Other annuities are not immediate. We're waiting we have that surrender period, and we're waiting beyond that surrender period before we even think about pulling out any type of money. Actually, that's my next slide here. So you got two types: immediate annuities, meaning your income streams begin right away within a year of you putting in money, and deferred annuities. Those are other types where we take out money later or not at all. I'm not saying you have to take out money later. Some people, like I have a couple clients right now where they're not ready to retire, but they're about 10, I would say 10, 15 years away from retirement. So because they're in what I call the retirement red zone, about 10 years away, we did an annuity because we're trying to just grow the money safely. We're growing the money as much as possible without losing any money. We're in preservation mode. You do get to a point with your wealth and your investments where we need to start preserving what we've accumulated. If you keep trying to grow, you're risking your money. You're risking the potential, putting yourself in a potential to lose it. So anyway, so that's what I mean. Some people, they could have a deferred annuity and they might not actually take income out at all. And so like for those clients in particular that I've worked with specifically, we're just growing the money, let's say for 9-10 years. And then in that 9 and 10 years, we're going to have options. Now we're going to just see, like, okay, do we stay in this annuity? Is there a different annuity that's available in the future? Maybe it's a whole other different investment option that we look at. So after that surrender period, you have options. Do we keep the money there? Do we put it somewhere else? Because one thing I can tell you about financial products is that they constantly evolve. An annuity today in 2025 does not operate the same as one in 2015 or 2005 at all. They constantly evolve. There's constant updates, rate changes. And so there might be something better, later that we could look at into the future. After that surrender period, you have options. You can then, after that surrender period, you can say, okay, well, my money has now grown to X amount. Let's see, do we keep it here or do we look at something different? So there's different types of deferred annuities. We have what's called a fixed annuity, a fixed index annuity, and then we also have variable annuities. And I want to go through the different, like, what are the differences among these types? None of these are immediate. These are all deferred annuities. So just comparing, annuity to annuity. So fixed annuities, these are like your most, I wouldn't say most common, but they're absolutely the safest. It says safety of premium, meaning whatever you put in is your premium. It's not subject to market volatility, which means whatever you put in will never, ever lose. You'll never lose a dollar beyond what you put in. Fixed annuities also tend to give a fixed rate of interest. So they could say, well, you give us this amount of money and we're going to pay you, 5% interest for the entire contract, year after year, 3% interest, whatever it is. It's usually not a crazy high amount. I would say probably about 5% or less, but you're guaranteed to get that interest, and there's no fees. There's usually no fees with those type of strategies, which is nice. So, like, again, compared to like an investment account or just when you're investing in the stock market, there's a fee tied to that investment somewhere. With annuities, there are no fees. No fees. And again, that's a big misunderstanding. And depending on where you fall in Google land, some people will say, oh, there's so many fees in annuities. Yeah, not all annuities have fees. So I like to compare fixed annuities as a better equivalent to versus having like money sitting in the bank, like in a CD. Like some people put money in a CD because they're like, oh, well, I'm getting this interest for this, fixed period of time. I think a fixed annuity could be a competitive solution to that strategy, because not only is the fixed rate of interest guaranteed, it doesn't go down, whereas a CD, the rates can change. So anyway, and there's no fees. So I tend to prefer that strategy versus having money in a CD at a bank. Then we have fixed index annuities. These are probably the more popular ones because one, they give you the safety of premium. Again, remember, whatever you put in, you don't lose. You will not lose. But these actually grow a whole lot better than fixed annuities because they're linked to indexes. So you have an index-linked return potential. So what's an index? An index is a stock market, a representation of like how companies are performing in the stock market. So the most popular index, I would say the average person might hear of is the S&P 500 index. The S&P 500 index represents the top 500 large cap companies in America. So think your Googles, your Amazons, your Nike, your Ford, Apple. All those big companies are within that S&P 500 index. So when those 500 companies do well, guess what? They increase in value. That index goes up. When those 500 companies collectively don't do well, the index goes down. So when those companies are performing, your annuity also follows that index and can grow in value if that index is performing well. There's different types of index. I'm just talking about the S&P because it's very, very popular. So instead of getting a small fixed interest rate, like 3, 4, 5%, like a fixed annuity, you can actually get an index-linked return, which can grow, we're talking double digits at that point, 10, 12% or higher, possibly. Now, not guaranteed, but possibly. And there's usually no fees on those as well, unless you're adding a rider or other benefit. So maybe that income rider that I was talking about earlier, you might see a fee there. Maybe not. Some of them don't even have fees for that as well. Some of them have other enhanced participation benefits, and that just means you can get like more growth. You can like kind of add like a multiplier on it, and you could just grow your money more. You would usually pay a cost for that, but usually fixed index annuities, there's no fees. Then the third type are variable annuities. So this is the type of annuity that you can lose money. So that's why it says there is a risk to the premium, meaning there's no protection from you losing money in the variable annuity. Now, why would somebody consider that? Well, because the annuity also has full market participation. And what that means is the growth factor, instead of it like maybe being attached to an index, is probably like directly invested in, they call it sub accounts. And these sub accounts are invested in the market and they go up or down. So they could go really high up, 20, 30% growth. But if the market takes a downturn, you can also lose it as well. So that's where the risks come in. And there's usually fees attached to variable annuities because, we have underlying investments that are involved. Those generally do have fees on those sub accounts. Now, I've done several variable annuities for a couple clients. And the reason was because of the income rider. And without getting into in depth, with the income rider on a variable annuity, the income rider is based on how much money we put in, and if the annuity increases in value, the income rider kind of calculates your income based off of what was that value, what did it grow to, and it locks it in. The income rider will say, well, your account hit, you put in 100,000, now it's 200,000. Now we're going to calculate our income based off of that $200,000 marker. And let's say the actual annuity actually dropped in value. It's no longer 200,000. It's actually like 75,000. Your income rider will pay your income off of that 200,000 that it locked in at. That's just a high level hypothetical. So for me, I've had some clients where I'm like, variable annuity makes sense because we get more growth potential. We could probably get higher income because of that growth potential. And I don't care what happens to the underlying contract because that will go up and down. It's the income rider that I care about, the income base. And that's just a separate value of numbers that we look at. So all three serve a purpose. And I think something I want to make very clear is because everybody's situation is totally different. Everybody's risk tolerance is totally different. Their income needs are totally different. So I'm not going to say one is better than the other. It just depends on your situation, what your financial goals are, and what are your needs. And that will kind of guide which annuities actually make sense. So I want to touch base on like comparing, annuities, in particular fixed index annuities, to other financial products. Because remember, one of the primary purposes of, anyone considering an annuity is because they want to put their money somewhere where they won't lose it. And so when we think about the spectrum of like investment options, cash, all accounts that are out there, there's always a level of risk involved versus the return that you're getting, right? If I'm going to be aggressive in the stock market, I should hopefully be getting a higher return because I'm taking on that risk. So if we kind of just go down here in the bottom left and move up, think of annuities as the riskier, the risk level that it's not on the graph would be the bottom line. The risk level increases as we go, across, but your return increases as well. So this arrow pointing up is, if I had this investment product, will it give me a higher return, or, will it have a higher risk, or both? So cash, if you don't put money anywhere, if you just, it's funny, I met two women this past week. They just keep cash in their, in the shoebox at home. Well, that's fine and all, but guess what? Your cash is obviously no risk at all, because it's not invested anywhere. It's not growing, but we also get the lowest return because it's not growing. It's just, cash. It's not doing anything. Then we have money at the bank, money market accounts, very low risk. You get a little bit of interest on those. CDs, pretty safe as well. You have protection in place. All these items where it says premium protected, meaning you don't lose money in none of this stuff. CDs, very safe. You get a little bit higher interest as opposed to, savings account or your money market account. Fixed annuities, remember they give you that fixed interest. So you still have that protection in place. You get fixed interest. Fixed index annuities, This is kind of right in the middle. Not only do you get that protection in place, you get the most growth opportunity with that level of protection. So it says fixed index annuities ensure that your premium is protected from market downturns, which puts them below the line on the chart. Now, all the other options above this line in the middle means you have no protection in place. So if you lose money, you lose it. So bonds will start to fall into that category. Variable annuities, remember I said they have those sub-accounts that are invested in the market you could lose. Mutual funds, stocks. I'll put, and this isn't my graph, I didn't create it, but, like crypto will fall way up here somewhere. The most risky, but probably could get the most return potentially. So the higher, the more we go to the right of this chart, these are the more riskier options that are out there. But the level of risk, guess what? We can get a higher return as well. So fixed index annuities fall kind of right in the center. We're getting decent return, decent growth, but we're not taking on all that risk. And so again, we're being strategic. We're being strategic about where we keep our funds. And Brooke, if you want to pull up that image I shared with you, please, I appreciate it. So I wanted to kind of just show you an example of how could this grow, right? So if you have, in this example, this is a chart of a fixed index annuity. Typically when I've been talking so far is we take all the risk off the table, right? We take all the risk off the table and it can grow upwards. So we have to understand that usually when there's no risk, the insurance company isn't going to let you just get all the growth available. They usually have a cap. There's usually a cap on the upside. So they say, great, we'll make sure you never lose money, but if the markets are performing well, you can only earn up to a certain cap. And so this is just a hypothetical look at what would that cap look like. How would your money grow with a cap? So we have the S&P 500 index, which I talked about earlier, which is the blue line. We have the fixed index annuity with an 8% cap. We have a fixed index annuity with a 10% cap. So what the hypothetical says, let's just look at each line. So the S&P 500 index, remember I said it's the top 500 large cap companies. Those companies do well, the index goes up. When they don't do great, the index goes down. So you can see just that blue line It's just going up and down, up and down, up and down. We got some spikes. We got some, downturns. If you actually kind of look at like the time period, so like the first like downturn, I know you guys, I don't think you can see my cursor because I'm not presenting, but look at that first dip at December 31, 2002. The market actually started going down from like, thank you. The market started going down from like December 1999 to 2002. It was going down for some years, just down, down, down. And what was happening during that time? Let's just think back. If you're old enough to remember, I was still in school, I believe. This was during the .com period. Remember when like technology companies were coming out? Remember when we didn't know if computers were going to fail because, turning into the new century, the year 2000, we didn't know, like going from 1999 to 2000, what's going to happen. We all thought the computers were going to just not figure it out and fail. So anyway, we called this the .com bust. All these technology companies did not perform well and the market just started tanking. That's what happened to the S&P 500. But guess what? What happened with your annuity? If you had an annuity at this time, and this example was starting with $200,000, when the markets were going negative, guess what? You wasn't losing anything. You also weren't gaining anything because the markets were negative, but you didn't lose. That's huge. You didn't lose your 200, because if you were invested in the S&P 500 and you started with $200,000, guess what? You would have lost half of it in 4 years. You would have been down to 100,000. But because you were in an annuity, guess what? You maintained your 200,000. You didn't lose anything. This is what we call zero is your hero. I'd rather have zero than lose half of my money. So guess what? After 2002, the market started going up. This was when the real estate industry was performing well. They were writing mortgages without, proof of income. All the way up to like 2007, this was happening. So every year, your annuity was increasing in value because they were like, oh, great, the market's performing. We're going to, increase your annuity up to that cap. So the green line was if you had an 8% cap. So if the markets was doing 8%, you got 8%. If the markets were doing 9%, you only got 8%. If you had a 10% cap, if the markets were performing up to 10%, you got the 10%. If the market did beyond the 10, you didn't get the 10. You got up to the 10. That was it. You didn't get 12, 15, nothing. You just got the 10. So then when the market did come back, your account value grew. So let's say again, if it would probably about 2007, if you were just invested in the stock market directly, your money would have barely caught back up to 200,000, which you started with way back in 99. But guess what? If you had the annuity, you were closer to 300,000 because the annuity protected you. It's so huge and important to understand that downside protection. It's a big, big deal. So we know that the financial crisis happened 2008, 2009. Guess what? The markets went negative. If you were invested in the markets, this is when I saw people lose 30, 40% of their 401k portfolio. They could not stop working. They would have lost money. But guess what? You didn't lose anything in your annuity. Zero is your hero. Markets come back up over time. So again, it's just showing the 8% cap versus the 10% cap. It's like a staircase. It can only grow. It locks in those gains and can only grow from there. Let's look at more recent years. 2020. What happened during 2020? The pandemic, COVID, markets dropped very significantly. Guess what? You had your annuity. You didn't lose $1. You didn't lose anything. You were about to retire. Guess what? I'm great. I'm glad I didn't lose anything. Markets come back up. You get that growth. And then the markets started their volatility again around 2022 to present day. We're still experiencing that volatility. We've been experiencing it for a couple of years now. It's been going up and going down. So this was as of the end of December 2024. Had you had a fixed index annuity with a 10% cap, you won. You didn't lose anything. Your money grew that 10%, up to that 10%, year after year. The 8% is actually a little bit down compared to the stock market, the S&P 500 index. But the question is that you want to start thinking of is, what feels better? Do I like opening my 401k, opening my retirement account, and seeing all these ups and downs. Does that feel good? like back last April, if you had an investment account and, Liberation Day, when our president announced all these tariffs and the market dropped 10%, did that feel good? It did. And people were like, should I sell? Should I sell? Why? Why are we selling our money? Why? Guess what happened? The next week it went back up. But anyway, most people can't stomach these ups and downs. Like, you're freaking out. Because guess what? What if you were trying to retire? Let's even go back to December 2022. Let's say you were ready to retire at this point. Your money, you started with 200,000. Now it's at just under $500,000. You probably wouldn't be happy about retiring when you could have had over 700,000. That's the comparison. And that's why I like this strategy, because when you get closer to retirement, we can't afford this loss. We can't afford this loss. So that's where an annuity can protect you. Okay, Brooke, you can change it back over. But I hope that makes sense, because a lot of folks don't necessarily know, like, how does that work? What would be the, why would we care? What would be the benefit of using this particular strategy? So let's go through a couple myths and facts, and then I'll kind of start winding down. So a couple, myths are, one, that these strategies are only for retirees, meaning only for people who are about to retire or are in retirement. Other myths, again, these things cost too much. There's such high fees. We kind of talked about that already. Another myth is thinking, well, I got in my 401k, I have investment accounts, that's enough. Why do I need to deal with this? We'll address that. Another myth is thinking, well, the insurance company, they're just going to take my money. They're going to steal my money if I pass away. We'll see. And then some say it's too complicated. That it could depend. That's dependable. The fact is, annuities are not only for retirees, they can help savers too. Like I mentioned, I have some clients who maybe in their late 40s, early 50s. We're using an annuity to grow it as much as possible without the risk. That's an example of a saver. I have that client who was in her 30s who could not stomach the stock market. I can't force anybody to do something they're comfortable with. She's a saver. At least I'm helping her save her money better than just having it at a bank account. The fact to counter cost too much or high fees, no, most are low cost or no cost at all. Again, it's just asking. Not every contract, not every provider has solutions that are no cost. It just depends. Most of them do. A great majority of them have no costs. Now, this one's huge. Again, about your investment accounts. My 401k is enough. Number one, nobody has a crystal ball. We don't know what can happen in the stock market, what can happen in the world. They can go up, they can go down. To be honest, up until the last couple of years, showing that previous slide, the market went up for a long time. It was like 10, 15 years when the market just went straight up. Like, not straight up, but it just was consistently increasing. And you could literally throw money in any investment. You would have won. You would have earned money. You would have made money without any strategy. You probably would have still earned some money. Now, with that happening, for 10, 15 years, the markets were going just up, up, up. We get amnesia. We get to a point where we forgot, the market could actually take a downturn. We were so used to making money, we forgot, like, COVID or something like a pandemic crazy could happen and the markets could actually drop. And that's when you don't want to take that risk, especially if you're getting closer to retirement. And your savings may not last. Like, you could have $500,000 in your 401k. And you could, trust me, you could deplete it. Don't get sick. Don't get sick, because you spend a lot of money in healthcare. I mean, I didn't even touch about healthcare costs in retirement. So yeah, you could accumulate a lot of money in your investment account or your retirement account, but even while you're pulling it out, that money is still fluctuating. It's still subject to ups and downs in the markets, and you could lose. Whereas the annuity, it can only grow. It can only grow. The fact that counters the myth of insurance company gets your money when you pass away. No, your beneficiaries do. They either receive the payments, or when I say payments, I'm talking about like survivor payments or the account value. If for whatever reason you started taking money out the annuity and there was actually still, to the underlying contract, there was still a value to that, your beneficiaries get that money. The insurance company doesn't keep it. It's not forfeited. Your beneficiaries will get that. And annuities, to be fair, I wouldn't say they can be complicated. You just want to have someone who's knowledgeable and who will break this stuff down for you, who will help explain to you what's the surrender period, what are the fees, if there are any fees, what are the expenses. Ask questions. Make sure you understand what you're signing up for. I unfortunately had a relative who knew I was a financial professional, and for whatever reason, she was about to retire, didn't call me, went to somebody else. They got her into an annuity. She didn't know nothing about it. She didn't understand anything. And then she called me like a couple months later, like literally freaking out on the phone. Like, what did I do? I don't understand. I think this person's stealing my money. And I was like, what? And then once I finally got asked a couple questions, I understood. I figured out he put it into an annuity. She didn't understand that. And I'm like, first of all, why would you go to somebody else and not your own niece who's been doing this in 20 years? I was a little offended by that. But anyway, she's not watching the webinar. But anyway, I was like, Auntie, you have to ask questions. Sometimes, and this is my native auntie, one of my native aunties, and I'm like, sometimes we get across a financial professional and we just nod our heads and we don't understand nothing. It's going all over our head. It doesn't make sense. Like even today, I could be trying to explain this to you in this webinar as best as I can. I hope it's making sense. But for some people, you might not get it right now. And guess what? That's fine. Sometimes it takes an explanation over and over. I would be showing numbers for your situation to make it a little bit more clear. But with any financial situation, any financial person you're meeting with, do not sign up for something that you truly do not understand. I want you to self-advocate for yourself. Ask questions. Make sure I really, really understand this. I understand the taxes. I understand the penalties, the withdrawals. These are questions you should be asking. Are there fees? How do you get paid off of this? Nothing wrong with asking questions. Please, please don't sign up for anything you don't understand. And that's why I was so frustrated with my aunt, because she even had my cousin there with her, who's my age, and she didn't know anything. If you're not a financial expert, you won't know this stuff, and that's fine. But I'm not even saying people will take advantage of your ignorance. Don't ever do anything with your money that you just don't understand. Same thing with people get scammed so easy. You can see somebody on social media like, oh, do this, this is how I double my money, and then you get scammed. All right, let me not go on that tangent, but understand what you're getting into. Ask questions. Advocate for yourself. If this person isn't explaining much, or they're just saying, oh, here, just sign here, just sign here, like maybe you might want to go with someone else. All right, let's just kind of wrap up a couple key elements, and then I want to talk about like how do you apply for it real quick, and then we'll wrap up. So a couple key elements, what have we been talking about? An annuity is a contract with the life insurance company. It's a contract. You give them a lump sum amount of money and they say, great, we're going to grow this money for you. And at some point, likely, we can turn this into lifetime income for the rest of your life. That's the key, it's the overall version of how an annuity contract works. Now, who is it ideal for? And this isn't the end all be all. I would say those age 50 plus, and even like I said, late 40s, getting closer to retirement. That's who this is really ideal for. If you have like an old 401k, if you have CD money, if you have money just sitting in the bank, you're probably better off with an annuity. Traditional IRAs, those are monies, like people say, where do I get the money from? Those are the type of accounts that you want to roll over and put into an annuity. There are some annuities where you can start from zero and you could put in, $100 a month, $50 a month. I mean, I don't really do a lot of those at all. There are some that is an option. What I'm talking about today will really be better suited for that lump sum deposit. If you're still working, let's say you're 50, 55, you're still working, you can actually contact your employer and say, can I do an in-service distribution? An in-service distribution is usually, it depends on the retirement plan, if it allows it. Your HR person will be able to let you know, but it basically allows you to take out some portion of your retirement account from your job, some of those monies, and roll it over to something else like an annuity, so you can grow and manage it on your own while you're still working. Because otherwise, while you're still working, it's not, you're doing a loan. So this is not a loan. This is different. It's called an in-service distribution, where you could use that as an option. Like, I have a 401k. Maybe I could do an in-service distribution, take some of that money out of my 401k and possibly fund it into an annuity. Annuities, again, can provide that downside protection, get that guaranteed income for life. And the growth, again, is totally dependent upon the type of annuity you choose, whether it's fixed, index variable. And then we have these new ones called RILAs, registered index linked annuities, which I like. So fixed annuities, again, just the benefits. We get that interest that grows. We have income options, the tax deferral. We have that contract value that can be passed on as a death benefit to your beneficiaries. So it really does, it is an attractive option. Not for everybody. It's not for everybody, but it is an option. I hope if you're educated more, you might at least consider it. Now, when you're deciding to purchase an annuity, there are some factors that an insurance company does look at. Like, these are big compliance transactions. To be honest, these take a lot of compliance because insurance companies want to make sure they try to do their best job to make sure that this is a suitable recommendation for you. You might love an annuity, but if your financial situation said, we don't want to tie all this money up, because remember, it's illiquid. So the insurance companies actually do a really in-depth compliance review to say, okay, what's this person's age? How much income do they have? What's their current debt? What's their current expenses? Do they have money outside of this annuity money to live off of? Because remember, we don't want you having a financial hardship and then trying to pull money out your annuity. That's the worst case scenario. What is intended use? What's your time frame? Do you have other assets, that you have access to? We call it liquidity needs. Do you have money in the bank? What's your risk tolerance? Because maybe you're super aggressive. An annuity might not make sense. You could probably just go straight invest right in the stock market. It depends. So a good financial professional, like I said, an insurance agent, they're going to really ask you a lot of questions. Like, we need to understand your entire financial situation. A lot of the annuity companies I work with, the insurance companies, they don't want to see no more than half of your assets and wealth inside an annuity. They don't want to see no more than half. Maybe depending on the situation, they might approve up to 70%, because they don't want all your savings tied away into an annuity. Because remember, there's surrender periods, there's fees, there's penalties if you need to pull money out. They want to make sure you have money elsewhere that you can have that's accessible to you, before approving this contract. So I want to make that very clear, because again, not everybody does it make sense for. It's one solution that could be in plan with other solutions. So you really do want to have other monies elsewhere that's accessible, because this annuity money, it's not supposed to be touched until you're really about to pull it out for retirement. So thinking about, different sources of retirement income. Again, and how long do they last? We have Social Security. That's it's pretty predictable program we can depend on. It'll be there as long as we last. Reliable income. This is where, an annuity will come in. That's predictable, reliable income, guaranteed. It has those contract provisions. I will get that money for the rest of my life. And then your personal savings, that could be like your regular investment accounts, your 401k. If you got cash inside of a life insurance policy, that will deplete over time. Now, will it last as long as you? Hopefully, we'll see. We don't know. So that just kind of sums up, like, thinking about how can an annuity really fit into my whole retirement plan. I hope you see that it's not just in general, and this is not a retirement conversation, but it's very similar. There's a lot of thought that goes into it. We want to make sure any strategy makes sense for you. All right. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll be happy to answer any questions while I share my contact information and pass it on back to Brooke. But I hope this is making sense. I hope at least you're like, let me learn more. Let me consider it. People don't plan to fail. They just fail to plan. I don't want you, stopping working and then you got to go back to work because we don't have enough money. Like, let's just look at strategies. The annuity could be a great strategy, might not be. And I'm not saying that, you even got to do it with me. Any financial professional, at least I hope you're at least more equipped of what to look for, what to ask, what questions to ask when you meet with them. For anyone who would like to connect with me, here's my contact information. I'm happy to have a conversation with you to see, happy to discuss an annuity or any other financial, solution. You can scan the QR code and do a 30-minute Zoom consultation. There's no cost for that. You can connect with me and get on my email newsletter or follow me on social media, or share financial tips and resources as well. So I hope this was helpful. And Brooke, I'm going to pass it back over to you. Thank you all so much for allowing me to share this information.
Yay! Thank you so much, Shantae. That was really informative, and no time like the present to start thinking about these things if you're not already. I have gone ahead and put today's webinar feedback survey link into the chat for everybody. If you don't mind taking a minute or two to complete that. I think it's like 10 questions total. It's completely anonymous, so you don't have to worry about your name or your email being tied to it or anything. Just lets us know what's working, what we can improve upon. We do share the feedback with our instructors, so it helps them as well. And there's even a spot on there to suggest future webinar topics that we can try to host for you. So that link is in the chat. We hope you can join us for our next webinar. That is going to be next week on the 27th. That will once again be instructed by Shantae. This will be about understanding life insurance. So it's going to be same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, 12 p.m. Mountain, 11 a.m. Pacific, or 10 a.m. Alaska. And you'll be able to find this as well as our other recorded webinars. They have moved to our Cathedra webinar archive on YouTube. There's a whole playlist. It has, I think they go back about 2.5 years or so, but it's a free resource for you to use. So feel free to go through there, share with your friends, share with your colleagues, anyone you think would benefit. We hope you can check out our upcoming training events. We post about them to our various social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. If you are a podcast listener, we have our own podcast that we produce in-house, the Hope Athanga Native American podcast. You can listen to that wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you are like me and you actually like to watch people when they do the interviews with the special guests, then you can catch those recordings on our YouTube channel as well. We have playlists for that also. But that is all we have for you today, folks. I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of their day. Thank you again for tuning in. We recognize that you could spend your time anywhere, so the fact that you spend it with us is really appreciated. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording, but I am going to keep the